I guess that's still a midlife crisis. I left. I quit the profession entirely and lived in a monastery, a Catholic religious community, for 3 years. When I was there, I really tried to encounter myself as a human being, not just a professor, not someone with a certain social status. And I wanted to think about, I didn't set it out this way in advance. This was just me working out my life. I wanted to figure out what intellectual life really was. What is this practice of reading and studying and thinking? Is it just a profession, something that we professors do? Or is it something that really belongs to every human being as sort of our natural heritage? And it was my instinct that was the latter, and I started to see the ways in which that might really work in practice by living in this community full of ordinary people where I didn't have access to the profession. One of the things I've tried to do in this book is to think about the bad reputation that intellectuals sometimes have and ways in which that bad reputation is deserved. So one of the things people say about people like me, professional intellectuals, is that we're lost in the stars, we're so withdrawn from ordinary features of life that we can't connect with other human beings. We can't connect with even our own bodies necessarily. And I think there's something in that. And it generalizes a bit past intellectual life into anyone who works with their mind and not with materials. There's something about working with materials which is deeply wholesome. Washing dishes is one example. Building things is another. And I think what's so wholesome about it is this. If you're doing something with your hands, something as simple as washing dishes or laundry, you're going to find things that will not work. You're going to find that reality resists your will. It's a bit easier to see with laundry than with dishwashing because there are those stains, and no matter what you do to the stains, they're not going to come out. But it's true for dishwashing too. You know, you're like, how am I going to get the grease off this pot? It's endless. It just keeps coming off the pot. Like, what do I need to do to get the grease off of it? There may be a point where you have to say, you know what, we're putting it away with some grease on it because I can't get the grease off. That's a pretty ordinary feature of our encounters with the world. It's the encounter of limitations. Things that won't do what we want them to do. Things that resist our wishes. What happens in the world of the mind that I think is really dangerous, and one of the reasons why intellectuals have such a bad reputation and why that bad reputation is sometimes justified, is that you work in the realm of language, and language doesn't fight back the way that reality does. You can tell yourself something is true, and it can be totally false, and it can sit there stubbornly for years without responding. In fact, wholesome functioning intellectual activity always involves something like that manual labor feeling of like coming up against reality. You're writing a term paper for your college class and the hours getting later and later. You had started with these grand dreams. You were going to write the best paper that's ever been written. And then finally it's 2 a.m. and you're dead and you realize it's just going to be a cruddy paper. That's a moment where like hard reality just cracks your ideas about yourself and what you wanted to be. And likewise, I think a scholar who's really trying to find out the truth about something, they can have a pet theory and then they can find a piece of evidence and they just can't, the theory's got to go. That could be very painful. So I think for me, having always been good with words, good with language, I could kind of talk myself out of anything. And for me to spend time doing things like wash dishes or sweeping floors or working with my hands, it forced me to become more accustomed to that resistance of reality. And I think that's a piece of our humanity that's even broader than intellectual life. One sign that anything we're doing is going well is resistance. That means that we have hit reality. And that's where we want to be, I think, as human beings, where reality is. So I decided to leave the community. I would decide to go back to St. John's to teach, to put teaching more at the center of my intellectual life. And I started to read about what was called the crisis in the humanities, really the collapse of the study of the humanities in universities in the US. And I didn't feel that any of them were saying the things that I thought were true. And so I wrote this book in which I tried to communicate this understanding of intellectual life as a human thing that I've learned through my life experiences. as well as through my studies. So I had a personal crisis, which was in some ways related to the other crisis. In 2015, which was when it was being written about, it was beginning to be noticed that contemporary colleges and universities, the study of the humanities was collapsing. So numbers of majors are down, departments are closing, and there's a loss in the common culture of a sense of why these kinds of study matter. And a lot of young people are under a ton of pressure to study in pragmatic fields to get degrees that will get them lucrative or prestigious jobs. And that means that things like philosophy, literature, political theory, they're disappearing, honestly, from our academic institutions. And there's a threat that they'll disappear also from our common life. One possibility is that academic institutions, universities and colleges can reform themselves, can take a good look and see what they need to do to restore and preserve these modes of study. So I think that would be good if that happened. I wouldn't depend on that myself. There's a lot of pressures moving the other direction. So the thing I'm interested in right now is really trying to find ways to bring it into ordinary lives of ordinary people so that it's built in, so to speak, into our ways of life. And there's an old tradition of that goes back to features of the labor movement in Britain and the US in the 19th and 20th century. Working people who would not normally have had the opportunities to have an education, formed grassroots organizations, reading groups, reading clubs. They gathered in the evenings. They read very serious books, Plato, Aristotle, Kant, Nietzsche, historical works, Eastern classics, you name it. And they educated themselves. They liberated themselves in a certain way, I think, from the diminishment of their surroundings as workers. I've read some of the history of those movements, and I think that something like that is possible now. That is, I think that people can organize together informally within their communities. There's actually a lot of opportunities right now online to connect with others, to read seriously, to think seriously, not for any special practical purpose, not to make more money, not to do some prestigious program or make a big PR splash, but just to grow and develop as human beings, to recover people's sense of their own dignity, connect with others on a deep level, cultivate an inner life, cultivate a practice of looking at the questions that are fundamental to human existence, not as a professional thing, but as an ordinary thing.
Chapter 2. What is an intellectual life?
So I define it in a few different ways.